didn't plan to stop there. One second I was walking through the rain, and the next I found myself in front of a narrow little cafe I swear I'd never seen before. It wasn't on any route I usually took. No name on the sign, just a flickering light above the door and the kind of silence that feels deliberate. Still, something pulled me in. The moment I stepped inside, the door creaked shut behind me and the city vanished. The cafe was dim and too still, no voices, no clatter, not even the sound of a coffee machine. Just a soft record playing something, old and slow, and the smell of roasted beans hanging in the heavy air. I took a few steps in, heart thudding a little harder than I wanted to admit. Before I could speak or look for a menu, the woman behind the counter raised her eyes to mine. Dark eyes, too dark somehow, and a face that didn't flinch when she said, "I'll have your usual ready." I stopped cold. My usual? I had never been here. I didn't even know what they served. I sat down at the nearest empty table, hands slightly damp from the cold, or maybe from nerves. I wasn't sure. The barista moved with eerie calm, not rushed, not robotic, but practiced. Like she'd done this exact thing 1,000 times. She placed the cup in front of me without a word, and I stared at it. There, written on the side in neat looping script, were 5 words that made my stomach turn. "Don't go home tonight." I stared at the message, then at the woman behind the counter. She was watching me, eyes still locked on mine, like she was waiting to see what I'd do next. Something about her made my skin prickle. How still she was. How not once had I seen her blink. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe this place had some weird gimmick. Maybe this was part of the vibe. But when I took a sip of the coffee, my throat tightened. It wasn't anything in the taste. It was just off, like the cup itself was warning me again. She was still staring, not threateningly, almost sympathetically, like she knew something I didn't, and part of her wished she didn't have to tell me. I looked back at the message on the cup. "Don't go home tonight." It didn't feel like a joke anymore. It didn't feel like a joke anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about that message. All evening, it echoed in my mind. Don't go home tonight. It sounded absurd, and yet something about the way she said nothing, just stared, made it feel real. In the end, I texted my friend Jenna and asked if I could crash at her place. I didn't explain why. I didn't even know what to say. The next morning, I woke up to a news alert on my phone. My heart stopped when I saw the headline. There had been a break-in at my building. 2 apartments were hit. One of them was mine. I sat in stunned silence while Jenna poured coffee. The barista had known. Somehow she knew. Later that day, I found myself back at the cafe, like I was sleepwalking. Same door, same creak, same smell in the air. She was already there behind the counter. Didn't even act surprised to see me. I barely had time to sit down before she placed another cup in front of me. This time the message said, "Avoid 5th Avenue." I stared at it, then back at her. "Why?" I asked. My voice sounded smaller than I expected, but she only looked at me with those bottomless eyes, then walked away. I took the long way home that night, skipped 5th Avenue, even though it added 20 minutes. Hours later, I saw the footage on the news. Some freak multi-car. Crash, injuries, chaos. Right on 5th. Right when I would have been there, twice. That was 2 warnings. 2 times she was right. And after that, the messages just kept coming. Each day brought a new cup, a new warning. Some vague, lock your windows. Some strangely specific. Don't answer your sister's call tonight. At first I thought maybe she was psychic, or a really good guesser. But it wasn't luck. Every time I ignored a warning, something happened, something wrong. A guy followed me halfway home after I ignored a note that said, "Don't leave after dark." Another time, I dismissed a message about a street corner and got caught in the middle of a police sting. I started to question everything: where I walked, who I talked to, even when I should sleep. I didn't want to be paranoid, but her accuracy was terrifying, I told my friends. They said I was stressed. My mom told me to stop drinking so much coffee. But none of them had seen those eyes. None of them had felt what I felt sitting in that cafe. So one afternoon, I decided I couldn't just keep obeying without knowing why. I went back, sat down, and stared at her until she came over. "What are you?" I asked. "How do you know these things? Are you watching me? Are you messing with me?" Her face didn't change, just that same calm. "I know what I need to know," she said softly, like she was reciting something. I glanced at the clock above her. The second hand was frozen. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but it didn't move. The cafe seemed to hold its breath with me. She leaned a little closer, voice quieter than ever. "You can't avoid what's coming," she whispered. "You can only be ready." The air in the room shifted. I felt cold, like something invisible had passed through me. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd gotten myself into something far worse than I realized. That night, I'd had enough. Her latest warning was scribbled in a rush across the cup: "Stay inside tonight." I stared at those words until they blurred, then pushed the cup away. No, I wasn't going to live like this, ruled by a stranger, jumping at every cryptic warning. I bundled up, shoved my keys into my coat pocket, and stepped out into the cold. The streets were strangely empty, quieter than usual. Streetlights buzzed and flickered above me, casting long, twisted shadows that moved even when I didn't. I kept walking, heart pounding harder with every block. The air felt different, too still, like the city itself was holding its breath. I caught shapes moving at the edges of my vision, quick, dark, slithering back into the shadows before I could really see them. I told myself it was my imagination, just nerves. Then came the whispers. Soft at first, like leaves dragging across pavement, then louder, words I didn't want to hear. "You should have listened. She warned you. Fate doesn't wait." The further I walked, the more the lights flickered. I started to run. When I got home, the front door to my apartment was hanging open, splintered. Inside, it was pitch black, silent. I stood frozen in the doorway, shaking. Her voice rang in my head again. "You can't avoid what's coming. You can only be ready." And then, the dark swallowed me whole. The door slammed shut behind me, and I was swallowed in blackness. Not ordinary darkness. This was thick, alive. I couldn't see my own hands, couldn't even hear the city outside anymore. I fumbled for my phone. The flashlight flickered on for a second, then died. Battery was full. I know it was. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Heavy. Wet. Coming from the far side of the room. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body refused to listen. I just stood there, my ears tuned to every shift in the air. The sound grew, louder, closer, until it was just inches from my face. I should have screamed, but even my voice had abandoned me. And then, something whispered right next to my ear. "You were told." Suddenly, light exploded around me. Every bulb in the apartment turned on at once, humming with electricity. But the room was empty. No footprints, no broken lock, nothing. Except the cup, sitting on my kitchen counter like it had been waiting. And on it, in smeared black ink, "Next time, you won't wake up." That was the last time I disobeyed. After that, I started following every warning she gave, without question. I'd show up at the cafe each day, silent, waiting. She'd hand me the cup. I'd read the message, and I'd do exactly what it said. I stopped trying to understand who she was or how she knew. It didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was that she was always right, Weeks passed, then months. Sometimes the messages were harmless. Take the stairs today, or don't wear red. Other times they were terrifying in their vagueness. If someone calls your name, run. But then one day, I walked into the cafe, and she wasn't there. Someone else stood behind the counter. A young guy with earphones in, barely paying attention. No cup, no message, nothing. I waited an hour, then 2. She never came. I haven't seen her since. Now every day feels like a gamble. Every door I open, every street I cross. I wonder if that was the warning I missed. The final one. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear her voice again. Soft. Cold. You can't avoid what's coming. You can only be ready. Have you ever been pulled from sleep so violently that your body forgets it was ever resting? That's how it felt the night everything changed. One moment I was drifting in the comfort of a deep sleep, and the next, a shrill, insistent ringing tore through the silence of my room, dragging me back into a world that felt suddenly colder, heavier, wrong. My eyes blinked open to pitch blackness. I fumbled for the source of the noise, my fingers brushing over the cold screen of my phone as its pale light lit up the time. 3:17 a.m. An unknown number glared back at me from the display. At first, I hesitated. I don't usually answer unknown calls, especially not in the middle of the night. But something about this one felt off. The way the phone rang, loud, sharp, like it wasn't just calling but screaming for attention. Sent a ripple of unease through my chest. My heartbeat quickened, and before I knew it, I'd accepted the call, bringing the phone to my ear with a shaking hand. Hello? I mumbled, my voice still thick with sleep. Silence. Not the kind of silence you get when someone forgets to speak. This was different. Heavy, oppressive, as if someone was there on the other side, not speaking, but listening. My skin prickled. I was about to hang up when I finally heard it. They don't have much time. The voice came through distorted, like it was crawling through a tunnel of static and ash. Each word was drawn out, fragile, like it came from someone exhausted. Or dying. I bolted upright, fully awake now. Who is this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel it cracking. The voice returned, even fainter. Help. Them. You have to be there. And then, nothing. Dead silence. The line cut out, leaving me sitting in the dark, heart hammering, phone pressed tight to my ear. The room suddenly felt colder, like the warmth had been sucked out the moment the voice disappeared. I stared into the shadows and tried to shake off the creeping dread curling around me like a fog. It was only when the voice started echoing in my mind again that it hit me. That broken rasp. It sounded like someone I knew, someone I hadn't heard in years. It sounded like my grandfather, but he died in 2017, and in that moment I knew something had just reached out to me from beyond. And it needed me. Urgently, I sat there frozen in the dark, gripping my phone like it was the only thing anchoring me to reality. My grandfather's voice, or whatever that was, kept looping in my head. They don't have much time. Help. Them. Be there. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself it was just a dream. Maybe my brain had conjured something weird in that hazy space between sleep and waking. But no dream ever left me with this feeling, like the air itself had turned heavy, and something invisible was standing in the room, watching me. I forced myself to breathe, to lie back down, to close my eyes. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I started to drift off, I felt that same presence, a weight at the foot of my bed, or the subtle pressure of eyes boring into me from the shadows. Eventually, I sat up and turned on the lamp. The sudden light felt too bright, too artificial. I scanned the room, hoping, praying, that I was just being paranoid. But my eyes landed on something that made my stomach twist. The photo. It sat on my bedside table. A picture of my grandfather and me taken years ago. The only one I still kept close. But now the frame was turned away from me, facing the wall. I was certain I hadn't moved it. I stared at it for a long moment before slowly reaching out and turning it around. And that's when I noticed it. Smudges. Faint fingerprints like someone had pressed their hand against the glass. Not mine. They were too small, too smudged. They looked old, like someone with dry, fragile skin had handled it. My mouth went dry and an involuntary shiver ran through me. I stared at my grandfather's face in the photo. His smile had once brought me comfort, but now it just looked distant, as if he was trying to warn me from beyond the picture frame. A soft creak echoed from somewhere in the room. I whipped my head around, heart pounding. Nothing moved, but the chill was back, thicker than before. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders, not for warmth, but for protection. Like a kid hiding from monsters under the covers. But I wasn't a kid anymore, and I was starting to believe the monster might not be hiding. It might already be here. In the stillness, one phrase whispered in my mind like a warning carried on the wind. It's not over. The next morning, I stumbled through the motions like a ghost in my own body. Coffee didn't help. The sunlight spilling through the window didn't warm me. The house still felt cold, like something had rooted itself in the walls overnight. I kept glancing at the photo on my nightstand. I hadn't moved it again, but the smudges were still there, hauntingly visible. I even thought I saw new ones. But what unsettled me most was the thought that wouldn't leave my mind. Who needs help? And worse, what if I'm already too late? By mid-afternoon, a sick kind of clarity hit me. Lena, my younger sister, she lived alone in a rental house on the edge of town. We talked often, but not recently, and though I had no proof, my gut screamed her name over and over again like an alarm I couldn't shut off. That phone call, the warning, my grandfather's voice, it had to be about her. I dialed her number. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. My heart began hammering as panic seeped in. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys, threw on a hoodie, and bolted out the door. The streets looked familiar, but as I drove, they felt strangely stretched, like I was driving through a dream where everything was just a little off. The trees blurred past too slowly. The shadows beneath them seemed to twist and writhe. At one point, the car radio hissed to life with nothing but static. I hadn't even touched it. I turned it off, but the silence felt worse. Then something caught my eye. In the rearview mirror, a figure in the back seat, just for a moment. Pale, slouched, watching. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Knuckles white, afraid to look again. But I knew who it was. I felt it. Please, hurry. The whisper came from nowhere, or maybe from everywhere. I blinked back tears. I'm going. I whispered, I'm going. By the time I reached Lena's street, the sun had nearly disappeared, swallowed by heavy clouds. Her house stood quiet, lights off, blinds drawn. I ran up to the door and pounded on it. No response. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. I stepped inside and called out, voice shaking. Lena? Silence. Then, the faint hiss of gas. The smell hit me first. Sharp, metallic, unmistakable. Gas. Lena! I shouted, my voice echoing. Through the dim house, no answer. I sprinted toward the kitchen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The stove knobs were turned all the way, hissing faintly. I reached out with trembling hands and twisted them off one by one, feeling the tension in the room shift the moment the gas stopped leaking. But then I saw her, slumped against the couch, in the living room, motionless. I rushed over, dropping to my knees beside her. "Lena!" I shook her gently, and to my immense relief, her eyelids fluttered open. She was dazed, eyes glassy, her breath shallow. What happened?" she murmured. "You're okay," I whispered, fighting tears. "You're safe now." I helped her outside into the cool night air. She coughed violently, but the color slowly returned to her cheeks. We sat on the front steps in silence, both of us shaken, both of us trying to understand what had just happened. She looked at me, weakly. "I must have left the stove on." "No," I said, more firmly than I meant to. "No, you didn't. Someone, or something, turned it on." She stared at me, confused, but deep down I knew she could feel it too. The same cold I'd felt, the same presence. That night she came home with me. I couldn't let her be alone. She barely spoke as we sat in my living room. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, weighted, like something was pressing down on us from the corners of the room. I watched the shadows shift around the ceiling, refusing to trust my own eyes. Around 2 a.m., I finally drifted into a restless sleep on the couch, Lena curled up in the recliner nearby. That's when the phone rang again. I jolted awake, dread flooding my chest. I grabbed the phone and my stomach dropped. No caller ID, just like last time. I answered. "Hello?" The same faint voice returned, this time more urgent, more strained. "You saved her, but it's not over." My blood turned to ice. "The time will come again soon. Be ready." Then silence. I stared at the screen as the call disconnected, my reflection barely visible in the black glass. My hands trembled. Whatever this was, it wasn't done with us. The following day passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. Every corner of my apartment felt heavy, like the air itself was thick with tension. Lena stayed close, her eyes darting toward every creak in the walls, every flicker of shadow that danced across the floor. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. The silence between us was full of understanding. This was no ordinary haunting. This was something deeper, something that wanted us to see something, or stop something. That evening, we were sitting in the living room again, the same two spots as if repeating some unspoken ritual. Neither of us reached for the TV. Neither tried to distract from the growing sense of dread that had become a constant companion. Then it happened again. The phone rang. We both froze. I slowly picked it up. Same as before. No ID. Just that eerie, glowing screen and the time, 3:17 a.m., burned into the display like a cursed echo. I answered. "Hello?" This time there was no pause. "You have to leave. Now. It's closer than you think." The voice was louder, clearer, sharper, and absolutely terrifying. "Who are you?" I demanded, but the line had already gone dead. I looked at Lena. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "We have to go," I whispered, and she nodded without hesitation. We packed in, silence, throwing essentials into bags, not daring to look out the windows. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was outside, watching, waiting. As we stepped onto the driveway, a sudden gust of cold wind swept over us, and then, out of the shadows, I saw him. My grandfather. He stood at the end of the driveway just beyond the reach of the porch light. Pale, translucent, and still. His eyes locked onto mine, filled with sorrow, urgency, and fear. His lips moved, soundlessly, but I heard the words in my head as if he were whispering them from inside my skull. "It's not the dead you should fear, but the darkness that hides among the living." Then he faded, slowly, like smoke dispersing into the air, until there was nothing left but the night. We didn't look back. We got into the car and drove, the headlights cutting through the black, as we escaped into the unknown. Even now, months later, I still feel it. That presence. That warning. And sometimes when I wake at 3:17 a.m., I wonder, was it really over? Or is something still watching, waiting for the time to come again?